Look around the world today. Every day, our screens are filled with images of missiles crossing the sky, warships moving across strategic waters, diplomats rushing from one emergency meeting to another, and experts debating who is gaining the upper hand. The entire world is obsessed with the battlefield. Everyone wants to know which side is stronger, who made the better military move, and who will emerge as the winner. But guys, stop for a moment and ask yourself a different question. What if the biggest consequence of this conflict has nothing to do with the battles themselves? What if, decades from now, historians look back at this period and say that the missiles, the threats, and the temporary military victories were only the visible surface of a much larger transformation happening underneath? Because this is something history teaches us again and again. The events that attract the most attention are not always the events that change the world the most. Sometimes the real revolution happens quietly. It happens in boardrooms, in government strategy meetings, in energy contracts, in infrastructure projects, and in the small decisions countries make when they realize that their old assumptions about security are no longer reliable. And this is where the story becomes truly fascinating. Most people try to understand international conflicts by focusing on what leaders say. They analyze speeches, they analyze threats, they analyze promises and public declarations. But understand this. Words are the most flexible part of politics. A leader can promise peace today and prepare for conflict tomorrow. A government can present a strong public image while privately calculating the economic costs of every decision it makes. This is why serious geopolitical analysis often focuses on something much deeper than intentions. It focuses on structures, incentives, and limitations. Think about a chess game. A player may have 100 different ideas in his mind. He may dream of attacking his opponent, controlling the center of the board, or delivering a brilliant checkmate. But his actual choices are limited by the position of the pieces in front of him. The board creates reality. International politics works exactly the same way. Countries have ambitions, but geography limits them. Governments have desires, but economics pressures them. Militaries have power, but logistics determine how long that power can be sustained. This simple idea explains why some of the biggest strategic decisions in history produced consequences that were completely different from what their creators expected. Take a strategic waterway like the Strait of Hormuz. For decades, it has been one of the most important arteries of global energy trade. A huge amount of the world's oil passes through this narrow passage, making it a point of enormous geopolitical importance. On the surface, controlling or disrupting such a route appears to be an incredibly powerful weapon. Think about it. If a country can threaten the route through which a major portion of global energy supplies move, it can create fear in international markets, increase oil prices, and place pressure on nations that depend on those supplies. It sounds like the perfect strategic advantage. But here is where it gets interesting. A weapon is only effective when the damage it creates for your opponent is greater than the damage it creates for yourself. That is a rule that has existed throughout military history. If you destroy a bridge that your enemy uses, but you also depend on that same bridge, then your action may become an act of self-destruction rather than strategic brilliance. This is the cruel reality of geography. A nation located near a strategic choke point may have the ability to disrupt global trade, but it also shares the consequences of that disruption. Its own economy can suffer, its own exports can become trapped, its own financial pressures can increase. The same geographical advantage that gives a country influence can also create a dangerous dependence. And this lesson extends beyond one country or one conflict. History is full of examples where nations discovered that possessing a strategic advantage does not mean they can use it without paying a heavy price. Now think about the response from powerful nations that seek to protect these vital trade routes. When a superpower sends naval forces, aircraft carriers, and advanced military systems into a region, the immediate image is one of overwhelming strength. The message is clear. We are here, we have the capability, and we can defend this system. But maintaining strength is very different from demonstrating strength. This is an important distinction that many people overlook. A country can launch an operation quickly. It can deploy forces rapidly. It can show its military superiority. The much harder question is whether it can maintain that commitment for years without creating economic strain, political fatigue, and strategic complications. Because military presence is not free. Every ship requires fuel. Every soldier requires support. Every operation requires enormous financial resources. Every month of continuous deployment creates a bill that eventually has to be paid by taxpayers and governments. And throughout history, the greatest powers were not defeated only by enemies stronger than them. Sometimes they were weakened by the growing cost of maintaining systems that became increasingly expensive to protect. Look at the great empires of the past. They did not wake up one morning and suddenly disappear. Their decline was usually slow, almost invisible. At first, everything looked normal. Their armies were still powerful. Their flags still flew across important territories. Their influence still appeared unmatched. But underneath the surface, a different process was happening. The cost of maintaining dominance was rising. The benefits of that dominance were shrinking. Other nations were quietly searching for alternatives. Trade routes were changing. Economic relationships were evolving. And little by little, the foundations of old systems began to weaken. This is a pattern that appears repeatedly throughout history. The great trading powers of the past became powerful because they controlled critical routes connecting different parts of the world. Whoever controlled the flow of goods controlled wealth. Whoever controlled wealth gained political influence. But there was always a weakness hidden inside that power. Once those routes became vulnerable or expensive to maintain, other nations started looking for different paths. Look at Venice. For centuries, Venice became enormously wealthy because it sat at the center of important trade networks between East and West. Its position gave it influence and prosperity. However, when new maritime routes were developed that bypassed Venice, the city's strategic importance gradually declined. It was not destroyed overnight. It became less necessary. The same pattern can be observed in many historical cases. Great powers often lose influence not because they are suddenly conquered, but because the world slowly reorganizes itself around new systems. Now think about the modern global economy. For decades, the international energy system has depended on a combination of strategic shipping routes, global financial arrangements, and security structures maintained by powerful nations. Energy flows through particular corridors. Transactions are conducted through established financial systems. Security guarantees support the movement of goods across oceans. This system did not appear naturally. It was built over decades through political agreements, military commitments, and economic relationships. But every system faces a critical test when a major disruption occurs. And when governments experience that disruption, they begin asking a question that can reshape history. What happens if this happens again? That question changes everything. A temporary crisis can end, but the memory of vulnerability remains. A ceasefire can be signed, but strategic planners continue preparing for the next emergency. A shipping route can reopen, but governments may decide that depending entirely on a single route is too dangerous. This is where the real transformation begins, not with dramatic announcements, not with a sudden collapse of the existing order, but through thousands of small, rational decisions made by countries trying to reduce their risks. A nation may decide to build new pipelines. Another country may increase its strategic energy reserves. Major economies may diversify their suppliers. New transportation corridors may become more attractive. Financial institutions may explore alternative payment arrangements. Each individual decision may appear small. It may not make international headlines. Most ordinary people may never hear about it. But when hundreds of these decisions accumulate over 5, 10, or 20 years, they can completely transform the balance of global power. And this is exactly why smart analysts do not only watch the explosions. They watch the infrastructure projects that begin after the explosions. They watch the trade agreements signed quietly after the crisis fades from television screens. They watch how countries adjust their long-term strategies. Because the war may end, the adaptation does not. And that, guys, is the part of the story that many people fail to understand. The most powerful changes in international politics often happen silently while everyone is looking somewhere else. The battlefield captures attention. The economic restructuring changes history.